Tomás Valles, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jesse.
So, dude, what I like to do is before we get started, I'd like to have you introduce yourself. Kind of give us a background about like where you're from, what you did, what you're going to talk about, and how you kind of fell into helping people get the most out of opportunities after youth sports. In other words, whether it be college, whether it be pro, whatever that may be. And just a side note, like just so people understand, like you and I go way back.
Way back.
We went back to. You went to the junior high?
Junior high as well.
So we went to junior high together. Which shit,
Yeah.
that was. Excuse my language. That was how many years
Late
ago?
80s.
89, 80, 89?
Yeah, 89,
89, 90, I think
Yeah.
it was. So it's a long time. So it was cool when my daughter started playing soccer. You were one of the first people that I actually thought about because I knew you were like heavy into soccer. And you know me, I never knew anything about soccer whatsoever. Like I had no soccer background when my daughter started playing. And when they started playing, they're really little. Like she was 4
Yeah.
years old. I didn't pay any attention to it until like maybe 5 years into it. Maybe she started like 8, 9 years old. She started to get really good at it. And I was like, oh, I better start learning about this. But I thought about
It's
you.
getting
and-
serious, yeah.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
we connected at the surf fields
Yeah.
when we found out, and you started messaging us, me and Lise,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, cool. Now we have somebody that we can kind of hit up. And throughout the years, we've been able to bounce ideas off you and chat with you about soccer, things that we never really knew about. So just a little bit of background for the audience to understand. Like we go back 30 plus years, 30 plus years.
Yeah, so I was born in 1880. Yeah, so kind of different from a lot of people that look like me. I was born in California. I was born in Blythe, California, which is on the border of Arizona and California. And I lived in San Diego. Actually, my dad was playing soccer at USD in 1978 and 79. I think it was the first team that USD had back then. And then I moved to Mexico. So then I was in Mexico for about 8 to 10 years. And that's kind of where I started playing soccer. That was the first sport that I started playing, of course, Mexico. Soccer is everything. And then I came back to the States. I finished off elementary school in Imperial Valley, which is Brawley. That's where my parents met. And then from there, we moved to San Diego. So I met you at Southwest Junior when I was moving back to California or back to San Diego. Then finished off high school, went to college, played soccer in college. That's where I met my wife, got married, and have 3 kids now. So I have my oldest is 32, played a little bit of soccer, mostly a baseball player. Then my daughter, she played everything as little because she started dancing, did gymnastics. And then when my son started playing soccer, she wanted to play soccer. So we started off with soccer. She moved over to softball and then actually did ice skating and then fell in love with volleyball. And I love being a volleyball dad because it was awesome. And then my little one, he had no choice. I knew at least one of the 3 had to be a soccer player. So he actually lied on his application to enter a league called NYS. I said that he was 3. He was close to turning 3 because he had to be 3 years old. And really they were just running around picking flowers, right? It's nothing serious, but he started at 3 years old. So I've been here ever since, played, you asked me about, sports. Back when we were young, you played multiple sports,
Right.
Started playing off in the street. We played, baseball, football, kickball, soccer, everything, right?
Tag,
in the street.
whatever.
Yeah, tag, hide and go seek,
Exactly.
started skating, became a skater. But, I got a chance to play baseball, organized baseball, soccer, organized basketball. And then when we met in high school, we were on the same football team. So, different from our kids, right? Because back then you played multiple sports.
Right.
And I think you learn from every sport, from every coach. It's different. So the upbringing was cool. It was different, but no parent involvement. My parents never went to any of my games. It was just basically friends from the neighborhood said, hey, we need somebody on the baseball team. Some guys that I knew from school took me down to Tijuana, and I tried out for a baseball team and made the baseball team as a soccer player, And my coach was David Gonzalez, which is Adrian Gonzalez's dad. And so that was an amazing experience, right? But it was only a couple years. And then I played basketball for a couple years, and that was fun. But soccer was always kind of my thing. So, I played soccer through, since I was a kid, middle school. I was a 4-year starter, in high school. Had success in high school. Had opportunities to go pro. Not pro. I did try out for a pro team in Mexico. I had opportunities to go college, but my parents weren't really involved in helping me get there. So I did play junior college for a couple years and then started working, and then my career ended. And then I just became, just a part-time soccer player playing different leagues here and there, indoor soccer, men's leagues, and then that's when I got the bug to be a coach, because I felt like, you know, I had good coaches coming up, but I didn't see a lot of coaches coming in. So I just felt, you know what, I have a lot of knowledge in the game, so I want to give back. So that's kind of a little bit of background on me.
You talk about, like, when you talk about getting into coaching, it sounds like you got into coaching the same way that I got into coaching, which was, well, I had more of an intention. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Like, I had a plan before, but this happened to my older brother. I started coaching when I didn't have kids. I started coaching my nephews, which are now they're in their late 20s and early 30s, because my brother saw who was coaching them, and he was like, man, those guys don't look like they're, and not to say the coaches didn't know what they're doing, but this was my brother was telling me. Yeah. He goes, those guys don't know what they're doing. Like, dude, can you just go coach him? Like, I know you know how to play. I know you know the sport. Like, just go coach him. So a lot of times parents will get involved for several reasons. But what I've found is coaches that get involved, or parents that get involved to be coaches that were former athletes and know the sport, a lot of times they get involved because they want to make sure that their kids are learning the right stuff, as opposed to just being thrown in. Because I've seen it, and it was funny because the first 2 seasons of like flag football my youngest played, I wasn't the coach. I let him be coached, and they were coached by kids. Like, it was like high school kids. They were doing the thing. And it was fun. He had a good time, and I watched. But when I saw that what he was able to do, like physically, because you can naturally see what your kid can do.
You can see their abilities when they're
right
little.
Off the bat, right? I mean, most parents, and as a coach, just for you parents out there, like, when I see a player, all I have to do is throw the ball to him and see him catch, run, and interact with it, and I'll kind of know roughly where his level's at initially. Like, an initial level, probably like 80% accuracy, like I know what that kid can do. So a lot of times people get involved in coaching that way, and that's what happened for me. So for you, you got involved in coaching. Was it it was Diego's your youngest, yeah?
Yeah.
So it was with him?
No. So actually, it's a funny thing. So I played 2 years at Southwestern College and had success. I did have an opportunity to try out for some D1 schools, but, you know, life happens and work started, so I didn't pursue that. But I did go back to Southwestern, and I helped. So I became an assistant the 2 years after I played at Southwestern College, and I liked it. Because the coach was kind of hands-off, so he would be like, hey, you talk to him. Hey, you make the subs, because he wanted me to kind of learn it. And I saw that I was very good at tactics, and I was very good at, you know, because I was a player, right? So if I'm telling a guy, do this, I'm telling you because I did it 2 years, or I did it for, you know, X amount of years. And I saw that I had an ability to talk to the players as a player. Not like when the coach yells at you, but kind of like, hey, Jesse, next time you get that ball, try this. Or did you think about this? So I saw that I had that, right? And then one of my best friends, Memo Medina, who you know, became a director at Rebels and said, hey, we're looking for coaches, you know, to coach at Rebels. And I said, you know what? You know, I've never coached kids, but I'll try it. And, yeah, you know, there wasn't YouTube back then, so it's not like I had anywhere to go and look. And Memo gave me some DVDs from Corver Soccer, which it's really at the time was probably the best out there to learn, you know, the proper way of teaching. These are all guys from Holland. So really good soccer instruction. And I just didn't know how to talk to the kids. So it was a learning process. So I coached before I had kids. And then when I started having kids, I stopped coaching because I had to dedicate time to my kids. Then when Diego started and then Isabella started, that's when I got back into coaching. And that's when I was coaching my kids. So I coached Diego since day one when he started up until I let him go at 10 years old. And then I coached my daughter for a couple of years. And, you know, I saw my daughter was super athletic. Soccer wasn't her thing, but she got really good at it. But she says it all the time. It's kind of funny. She says that she stopped playing soccer because her coach was too mean, and that was me. But I knew that she had athleticism, and I knew that she was aggressive. I just needed to find something that she could be good at, which we did. We tried softball, and she was good at softball. And she was dominating in softball, but she wasn't having fun. And then when she went into volleyball, that's when I saw my daughter having fun, excelling, and I said, okay, this is perfect. And, of course, I don't know anything about volleyball, so I didn't coach her there. And that was the best time for me because I just got to watch.
Right.
It's different when you coach your kids, you know, because you've done that. When you coach your kids, it's like you want to be hard on them. You want them to work, but you also want to enjoy it, and it's kind of hard. So I don't recommend it to people to coach their kids. Let other people coach it. Right. Just find the right coach.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's a lot of truth in what you say. It's very difficult to coach your own child in your sport. I found on the first one, I learned from the first one how to handle the rest. So I always say this all the time. It's unfortunate that my oldest son got the brunt of probably my worst coaching. Not from a technical standpoint, because he got everything he needed to know of how to play the sport, but more so from like understanding how to be a dad and be a coach at the same time. Like you literally can't be those two things. Like you have to be a coach when you're a coach, and a dad when you're a dad, and you have to know when those two things have to happen and how to shut one down and then start the other one up. So I had to deal with that. And another thing too is, like, when I put my daughter in soccer, I was kind of in the same boat as you. I didn't know anything about soccer. Like I played in rec. I was good at soccer. I liked soccer. But when I got older, there wasn't enough room for all those things. Like soccer was during baseball season? Yeah, I played baseball. So it was during baseball season. So, and it wasn't like a love that I had, so I played baseball as opposed to playing soccer. But when my daughter showed that she wanted to play that sport, I knew what I had to do. I had to find a coach, somebody that knew the game, that saw the game through tactics. The way that I saw football, I needed to find a soccer coach that saw soccer. And luckily, that's what we did. We found somebody that saw soccer the way we saw it, made it fun like I made it for my kids. When I coach a team, it's always fun because they're little. You know what I mean? Like, they want to have a good time. If they're not having fun, it's not going to matter. They're not going to want to do it. So I can totally relate to what you're talking about in terms of like finding that. And watching soccer, the thing I like about soccer is the only thing I talk to my daughter about, and throughout the years have talked to her about, is effort. And then I ask questions. I never critique. I never really critiqued her because A, it's not my sport, and B, it never really helped. Like when I could try to critique, it never helped. So I would always just ask questions like, hey, what happened here? I saw this happen. What were you thinking? Because I want to get in the mind of her as a soccer player. She would talk to us, her mom and I, over the years about that stuff, and that helped me understand the game and understand what she was seeing, because I didn't know anything about it. So I think sometimes when you're not within that sport, like, it's a really good thing.
Yeah, step back, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's when I coached Diego, my approach to it was I was going to be harder on my kid than I was on everybody else's kid.
You have to be.
Because I didn't want anybody to ever say, hey, why are you yelling more at my kid? I don't see you yelling at your kid. Yeah. But granted, my son had the ability and he put in the effort. So when I yelled at him, it was really because I wanted more from him, because I wanted him to be the best he could be. But I always had to be conscious about that, right? Because I didn't want a parent to come back to me and say, hey, I didn't like the way you yelled at my kid today. That wasn't right. I don't see you doing that to your kid, right? So it's tough. It's tough to be in that situation. So I was smart enough to know at one point, I got my son to as far as he got with me.
Right.
I knew he needed to go to the next level, right? Which is when I took him to another club. And that's where things really changed for him, where the training was more, the intensity was more, the competition was more, and the traveling started. That's when the traveling started. Spending money, right? That's when you know that it's a huge investment. Showcases here in Arizona, Texas. We're going to Las Vegas. That's where I saw that it was real, right? But because of my history of being an athlete and being a coach, like with my daughter, I told her, you're going to take this as far as you want to take it, and I'm going to be there to support you. I know nothing about volleyball. Right. So I have to get you to the best club in our area that's going to teach you and help you so that you can be successful. And she had success. She played, she made varsity as a sophomore and became a captain as a senior. And she played club volleyball at her school. And that's as far as she wanted to take it. My son had a different approach. He said, Dad, I want to go pro. And I said, I don't mind going college first, but my end game is to go pro. And I said, that's great. I will support you, but you have to put in the effort. I'm not going to put in the effort.
Right.
I already had my chance. My dream came and went, and I'm happy to be a dad. But if that's what you want, you have to put in the effort. And if I see you put in the effort, I will support you.
Right.
And, it changes things, right?
Yeah.
And that's a conversation that some parents don't have with their kids.
I agree.
And kids are in limbo, right? Because they watch TV and they see professional soccer players and they see, these guys driving around in, Bugattis and stuff, and they think, oh, I want to do that. Do you really want to do that? Because they're sacrifice. Right. Playing soccer is a sport that's all year round. Some of the other sports, football, basketball, it's just a season, right? Soccer, it's all year. So the moment I saw that that's what he wanted to do, then that's when I knew, we had to put them at the right club, get them the right training, get them extra training, start traveling to tournaments and showcases in Mexico, start traveling all over the States, start going to Spain, start going to England. Like, it's a big investment that I wouldn't make if my son didn't have that dream and didn't have that drive. Right? Because if he just wanted to play with his teammates or his classmates and have fun, then we would have stayed like at a rec club or something to that effect. But, when I saw he was all in, then, my wife and I said, okay, we got to support him.
Right. And I think that's really cool that you say that, because literally everything you're touching on is what we did. Like, it's an exact duplicate and a replica of what we did with our kid, what we do with all of our kids. And it's a replica of the philosophy that we have. It's funny because we come from the same era, from the same place. So maybe it was bled into us by the coaches, the good coaches, because we had really good coaches
Amazing
back
coaches,
coming up. And I think that a lot of that bleeds into like your mentality and your philosophy, because for us too, I love the fact that you said like it was up to him. So you allowed him to like lead that journey. And the biggest thing for me is that I preach and try to tell everybody you really have to do is you really have to create clarity between the roles, and you really have to allow that your athlete to decide and commit to the process. So you told him, hey, if you want it, you have to want it. What are you willing to do, basically, right? Yeah. What are you willing to do? Here's what I'm willing to do. Me and your mom are willing to do this, this, and this, and that's what you can expect. That's what we do and have done with all of our kids. And I preach that to the parents, like, have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan for your child, they're just like, it's a boat floating in the ocean with no navigation. But if you have a plan, and your son has a plan in his mind, like, I want to be here. Okay, well, if here is right here and we're over here, how do we get there? Like, what are the things that we have to do to help you navigate? And the last piece of that for me is understanding that we can put the perfect plan together and it still may not work out. And you have to be okay with that. You have to know that we're going to go on this long journey and we may never get to our destination. And if you're okay with that, then we're on. Let's go. Let's do it. So all that stuff made perfect sense to me, and it's totally in line with with what we do as parents and with what I kind of preach to people and say, hey, this is the kind of the roadmap I would say you have to take.
Yeah, and I think some parents chase medals, they chase trophies.
I've heard that. Well,
if you're chasing trophies and medals, how is your kid going to get better? Because if you're winning all the time, you are not playing the top competition. Right. So if you're in a competitive environment and your kid's goal is to play D1 college or be a pro athlete, you have to play the best. And you're going to have adversity. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win all the time. And you mentioned coaches. I had great coaches that were very motivational. I don't know if they were the best coaches for me, but they inspired me. They were leaders, and they're people that I respected. My son hasn't had that all the time. He's had coaches that saw something in him and trusted him, and he played all the time. And then he had other coaches that just didn't think that he was contributing, so he got to sit on the bench. And I personally love that because it taught my son that you're not always going to get what you want. Right. And if that coach doesn't see what you see in yourself, then you're doing something wrong, or you got to give more. You got to make it hard for that coach to leave you on the bench. So I love the adversity. And yeah, my son had a lot of success. You should see his room, all the trophies, all the medals, but he's lost a lot of games. Yeah. And I love that too, because you're not always going to win. Right. And if you lose, what do you do about it? Do you just, put your head between your tails and walk away? Or do you tell yourself, I have to work harder. We have to work harder. I want to come back and play this team again. Like, that's when you know the kid's a competitor, right? Because if that's not their mentality, then they're just there for the ride. They're there because it's fun and parents are having a good time when they travel. The parents get to go out and have drinks while the kids are in the room playing PlayStation. But if that's what you're there for, then why are you doing it? You're just wasting your money.
Right. If you're going to go that. It's funny, man. It's like we're speaking the exact same language. And it doesn't surprise me because I know you and I know about your background and we played together and I understand kind of your mentality. And as a parent, us having conversations just on the phone, like, we're very, very similar. And I love adversity because, like you say, it's never going to, they have to understand that part of the process is failure. And I always tell people that you have to be willing to fail. It's a part of the process. It's going to happen to everybody. I was in acting for a while. And the thing I loved about acting, the foundational tool that I learned about acting is that we go to class to fail. That's what we go. My teacher always said, you're here to fail. Take as big a swing as you want. You're going to find out what works. You're going to find out what doesn't work. But if you come in here and play it safe you're never going to learn anything. You're never going to get better. You're never going to create that tool chest that you need to draw from when something happens on set or when you're in a play. Like, you're not going to have any of those tools. It translates so much over to athletics. Is like, I always tell my kids in practice, like, we're here to fail. Like, let's try stuff and see how they work out. I'm going to give you what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. But if something naturally comes out of you and you want to try it, like, try it. And I think that for my daughter, she learned to do that so much when she was young that when she got into games, like, it became creativity. It became like she's different than the rest because she's willing to try it and fail. And then the more she did it, the more it succeeded. The more those things that were kind of like crazy and out there, they were working. So now she had those tools in her tool bag and she was able to, like, use them on a regular. And she's dealing with some adversity now. As you know, she just went to college. She's used to playing a lot all the time, but she's not playing as much. It's not because she's not good. She's good just like the other girls. It's more so like you have to understand there's a system in place. You're coming into that system.
You have to learn the system.
You have to learn the system. You have to learn, and not just the system of like the game model, because for her, the game model is the same. They got their game model from us, which is great. So she understands all of that. But the system of college, the system of the coaching, the system of you're a national player coming back, there's this amount of time you have to rest before. Like, it doesn't matter how big the game coming up. Like, they have all these things set in place to protect you as a player. And her struggle is now dealing with just the frustrations of all that. But like you say, you have to have that adversity in life. And she's getting it right now, which for me, I love it. Like, it doesn't bother me whenever she is talking about something and it's frustrating her. I just say, oh, well, you got to deal with it. Go talk to your coach. Figure it out. You got to figure it out.
See, and my son's going through the exact same thing, playing D1 college. He was a starter forever, right? Played all the time. Yeah. Won 2 national championships, 1 Dallas Cup, in a big stadium on ESPN. So he never left the team. He never left the field, right? He's always out there because the teams trusted him. Now he's a freshman. There's guys that have been there 3-4 years. Yeah. Grown men. They've paid their dues, and he now has to work to get an opportunity, right? It might not even be this year, but he knows where he's at. He's working at it, and you got to trust the process, right? Everybody has to go through a process. It's not given to you on day one. Everything's earned, and I think all the lessons that we learned together, because we learned together, now it's like I can have a conversation with him and say, like, hey, at practice, you give your best always, whether you're rostered for this game or not. Always show positivity, always show camaraderie, always be a team player. Mm-hmm. But, I tell them the same thing. Be different. Risk. Your whole life you took risks. When you get the ball in practice, you got to take players on. If you're going to play it safe, guess what? Coaches are never going to have confidence in a kid that plays it safe, So these conversations that we had when he was 10, 11, 12, I'm having with him now. He's 18 years old, And we talk more now than we did the previous years because – the kids don't want to hear from their dad, right? If somebody else tells them, they'll listen. But they don't want to hear from their dad on a drive home from Mesa, Arizona, after you just lost to a team 2-0 in 120-degree weather. He doesn't want to talk about the game. Yeah. His feet hurt. He gave it everything he had, and he didn't come out with the win. He doesn't want to talk about the game anymore. Yeah. Parents do. Yeah, I know. But the kids don't, And I think some parents make that mistake,
Yeah, they do.
They make it where it's about them. Instead of just being supportive. When I coached, I've coached the sons of guys that played on national teams, on guys that played at a World Cup, right? And they were my best parents. I would go up to them and say, hey, what do you think? How do you think I coached today? Oh, you're doing great, coach. Keep doing what you're doing. Because they understood it's a process. Yeah. It's not about that one practice. It's not about that one game. They knew that as long as you're doing the right things and you're coaching the right things, the kids are going to learn from it. But it's some of these parents that they never played the sport. Those are the worst. Not because, they never played the sport, but it's they don't understand. They've never been in the shoes of their kids. And they become these helicopter parents that they think, what's it called? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Yeah. I got to go talk to the coach. I got to talk to the parents. I got to rattle them up because they're not playing my son. Instead of understanding what's happening, there's a reason your son is not or your daughter is not getting the minutes that you want them to because you're not at practice. You're not seeing what the coaches are seeing, But I think coaches as well don't really talk to parents. They don't tell the parents what's going on. Some clubs do. Some of the clubs that your daughter and my son played at, they would have these conversations with the with the players before the season. What are your goals for the season? What do you want to accomplish? And then they check in halfway through the season to see, are they on the right track? But a lot of coaches don't really talk to the parents about the kids' development. And at the end of the day, especially when you as a parent are paying for your child to learn a sport, develop in a sport, you need to have that feedback. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of parents don't get it. So I think that leads to the frustration with some of these parents. They have these expectations about little Johnny should be scoring 5 goals a game, but little Johnny's not putting in the effort in practice, so he's not even getting in the game. And they're losing their mind. Sometimes I get it. You pay to travel, you pay the coaches, and you expect your kid to play, but this isn't, it's a meritocracy, right? You got to merit the opportunities that you're given, but the kids.
It's all performance-based.
It's all performance-based,
Yeah, I agree. And the funny thing is that a lot of times what parents, it's because, like you said, they don't really have an understanding of it. So they don't know how to attack that problem. And a lot of times that's part of having that plan. Knowing that, whatever club you're in, for me, when they're in the youth, everything's about development. Everything. All of my kids in football and in soccer for my daughter was all about how do we get better. Because I understood when I was coming up, playing high school, every offseason, playing in college, my whole goal was what can I do to get better the next time I get out there? And our sport's different than yours. It's not year-round. So when we finished the sport, I had 6 months, 7 months to train.
To prepare.
And I was preparing. And I knew I had to do something. And I knew the basic things of what I needed to do, which is like speed, strength. Those are things I could control. And I would work on that consistently. And a lot of times parents, they don't, like for our clubs, we had an IDP with the coach. Hey, he'd tell us what he thought. He would ask Jaden in front of us where he thinks where she thought she could be better. What do you think you need to develop? What are your long-term goals? That's amazing for parents to hear because and I knew where he was coming from because I'd done that stuff in the past. But it was nice to hear that, and it's even nicer to hear your child start to talk about this is what I think I could do to get better. This is what I think I do really well. That way they have a plan on what they can do to get better. And I totally agree with you. That as a parent, it's our responsibility to find those environments to place the kids in so that way they can get the most out of their development. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to develop the kids to be the best they can be and reach as far as they're willing to go. And you can only do that if you have a plan in action and people that are within the plan. In other words, the coach, the parent, the player, we're all part of that plan. And if we're not all on the same page, then we're just spinning our wheels. And like you said, any club sport you play, I feel bad for you because you had a volleyball player.
Yeah.
And if you think soccer is expensive, people don't realize volleyball is a whole different level. Yeah. But if you're going to invest all that money and all that time, you better make sure that it's for the right reasons and that you really have a plan of action to get out of it what you're trying to get. And if your kid's trying to get to the next level, which our kids were trying to, you need to have a plan for that. That's one of the main reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show. You have really great insights in terms of how to be a good parent to athletes because you've done it, obviously, and we come from the same area, so I think we think a lot alike. But more importantly, when I spoke with you and you started talking about how you were helping people get exposure, these kids get exposure to the next level opportunities in colleges, it sparked my interest because I think that's a big part of what parents are looking for. They think that if they sign you up to a very expensive club, you're going to automatically have opportunities and all these things. And in some cases, you're going to get a little bit more exposure because you may have the club name, you may be playing with really good teams, but how do you turn that into an actual opportunity? And so I know you've helped your son and you've helped other people and you started working on this stuff. I'd like you to shed some light on, when did you know that Diego, when you had that conversation, how old was Diego when you had that conversation that he told you what he wanted to do? And from there, what were you doing as a parent before you started helping other people? What were you doing as a parent to get ready to help him achieve his goals? And then how did that translate into helping other people?
Yeah, so great question. So with Diego, of course, he was at a good team, right? A lot of good players, and we were having success. So early on, I think he was turning 13 to 14 years old. When we were traveling to, let's say we went to Mexico, I would have pro teams approach my son, say, hey, I want you to come for a month. I want you to come and train at our facilities, right? He was too young, right? So that wasn't an option for us. And then he started getting exposure here in these big showcases and tournaments where MLS academies started to pay notice, and he would get invitations to go. So he did get 4 MLS Academy invites, and he got offers. But he was still kind of young, right? He was 14, and that's when we were kind of telling Diego, is this something you want to do? because I'm not about to send you to another state where I can't see you, unless this is your dream. Like if you want to go pro, then this is the route you have to take, right? So that was an opportunity. And then when he turned 15 and 16 is when I saw that his mind kind of focused, because he did have some pro invites to train in Spain, to train in Mexico, here in the U.S., where he said, Dad, it's not going to be easy to become a pro athlete, but I think I can be a D1 athlete. And that's when the conversation started about him wanting to be a D1 athlete. Because since he was little, I want to go pro. And you know the statistics, right? Mm-hmm. How many kids play college? Very little. 1 to 5% of all the kids that play any sport go to college at a high level. And then of all those that go to college, 1 to 5% make it pro, right? So the odds are against you. But you don't want to tell that to your kid, right? Because that's his dream. But when he said college is an opportunity, then I knew our focus had to shift, right? Our focus had to shift where how are you going to be seen? Where do you want to go? And how do you want to approach this? Because I think a lot of parents don't understand that, it's very rare that a kid's at a game and a school comes and says, I want to offer your kid a full scholarship. Don't exist anymore, especially not in soccer, right? Because not only are you competing with other kids that are playing your same position on other big teams across the country, you're also competing now with the player portal, and you're competing with kids that are international. So now that pool just became a lot smaller, right? So once we realized that, hey, that's something he wants to do is, okay, you got to get a highlight film. You got to start reaching out to schools that, you think you might want to play for, because it's kind of like a dating thing, right? Sometimes kids get offers from schools that want them to play for them. But a lot of times, unless that coach knows that you have an interest in their school, they're probably not going to go watch, right? And then it's just, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to showcase yourself when you do go to those big tournaments, playoffs, or showcases, and you're playing in front of 50, 60 coaches, right? What are you going to do when you're out there? So it's a whole conversation. So I think that's kind of where things happened for my son, right? And, luckily for him, he had a lot of interest from a lot of schools. A lot of the schools were outside of California, which was kind of different for us because we always thought he's going to play here in California, right? Mm-hmm. This is where, most of the sports dominate because we have, the greatest weather, a lot of good leagues, good competition. So he wanted to stay in California. But the reality was that a lot of the schools that showed interest were not in California. So I think for us, it started with the conversation. Then it's, I'm very methodical about how I do things, and it's probably because of my job, where I started making spreadsheets, right? And I told my son, like, what are your dream schools, right? And he listed his dream schools. Some of these were big programs. And what about other schools? What other schools do you know? And he doesn't know. He's a kid in high school. Right. He doesn't really know. He would go and look up rankings and be like, oh, look, this school they're ranked in the top 10. But I would tell him, well, let's look at the team, how they play. So we would go on YouTube and see how they play. Do they play the style that you play? So it's a lot. There's a lot to it. It's a science. It's not something that just happens overnight. Right. And it's interesting because, he was in a team that had a lot of success. But sometimes when we would go to showcases, we wouldn't really win these showcases because the coaches were fair and they let everybody play. So the results weren't really, what the reason the team was there to compete for. But, I remember this one time we were in Arizona, in Phoenix, and there was like 60 to 80 scouts were at that game. And it's because we were playing another big team. So I don't know if they were there to see our team or if they were to see some kid on the other team. But to me, that was an opportunity, right? And I told Diego before the game, and I said, hey, you never know who's watching. Because that was something I always told my son. When you play a game or when you're at practice, you never know who's watching you. Show them who you are. Take risks. Take players on. Be that kid that has confidence. Talk to your teammates. Be a competitor. Because guess what? Those scouts are looking at all those things. So this one showcase in Phoenix, my son balled out. And he always had good games. He was always that kid that gave you good efforts. But that showcase, he balled out, Jesse. Like, he was at another level, taking balls out of the line, winning balls, getting shots, scoring goals, celebrating his goals, which I always tell him, when you score a goal, celebrate it. Let them know that you're passionate about this, Right. After that showcase, 16 D1 schools reached out to him. 16. And that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
Of those 16, Jesse, how many do you think already knew about my kid?
I don't, maybe 4.
10. We had already emailed because we had a list of all the scouts that were going to be there.
Got it.
So my son, with the help of his club, because the club does have a coach that helps these kids, we emailed all the scouts that we knew were going to be at that tournament. Not that they were going to be at the game. And we said, hey, I'm interested in going to your school. Your school's program is something that I would consider for myself. Please come out and watch me. This is my schedule.
Right.
For this game, we're going to wear a white uniform or a blue uniform. I'm number 11, and this is the position that I played. And then the other thing that our club does that a lot of clubs don't do, and it just blows my mind, is we have a team roster. And our team manager and another parent would walk around the fields before the games and hand a roster to every scout that's watching. Not only did they hand the roster to every scout, they wrote down who the coach was. So after the games, the parent would send a list to other parents and said, hey, this school was at the game, this school was at the game. Then my son, after that weekend, would create a highlight film of his best plays and would send it out to all of them because he didn't know who saw him and who didn't. Right? So it's a lot of work. It's not just like, hey, I'm a great player. Yeah, he balled out. All of a sudden he's going to get an offer. No, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in order for that school and that coach to know there's an interest, right? So
I like everything you just said. It's so technical and it's so methodical and planned out that I think that it's probably the best thing for 99% of parents who want their kids to have an opportunity. The reason why I say 99% is because I feel bad like we didn't do any of that. But the reason we didn't do any of that was because at a young age, Jaden was plucked at a young age for the national team and all that kind of stuff. So she kind of had extra eyeballs on her at an early age. And we kind of knew that we weren't going to have to worry about that. Like, not to say that we wouldn't have done it like you did, because I'm the same kind of nerd. I'll pull out a spreadsheet, and I do spreadsheets for we're going on a vacation for the World Cup.
Yeah,
I have a spreadsheet everywhere we're going, how much it's going to cost, what I've already, but like that's how I nerd out on stuff like that because I like to be prepared. But we didn't have that. Like, we didn't have to worry about that. But the fact that you did that and it was so methodical that you knew exactly who was there, because our team mom was amazing for surf, the 2008s, amazing. She had all the stuff ready. We had a great group of parents. So I think that's another thing when it comes to soccer anyway, is like if you have a really good group of parents, like that can set up everybody for success because everybody has a skill set that they're willing to give to the team. They created a website. They created videos. We had a photographer. Our team photographer is amazing, Meg. She would go out and take the best photos. So all the photos you see us posting and stuff of Jaden, it's all from her. It's like a professional photographer for the team. We had that same little manual that you're talking about. We had one of our guys put a QR code on it. So you could click on it, go right to the website. Each kid had a QR code. So not just the thing. So there are teams out there that do that kind of stuff that you're talking about, and that's the kind of stuff that can get you exposed. And I love the fact that right after the game, like freshly created his site. Did he do it in like Veo? Was it a Veo thing?
Veo, yeah. So
he would do his clips on that. So again, finding a club that has access to that stuff. For football, it's Huddle. Yeah. So we use Huddle. So like my son, when he was last year when he played football, I said, hey, go and get all your highlights for Huddle, create them all, clip them all, start putting them out there. Like he's in the 8th grade. Like you got to start now because it's going to go fast. And if you don't have a plan of action, then it's going to be a problem. So all that stuff that you're talking about, I think it's going to affect 99% of the people. There's that 1% that's just going to have eyeballs on them for one reason or another. And I love the fact that you said you never know who's watching. Because we've preached that to our kids, not just in sport, but in life. You never know who's watching. So you need to, and for us, it was more like you need to be respectful at all times, everywhere you're at, because you're walking around with my last name.
Yeah.
You're not walking around with yours. You haven't earned it yet. I built that last name. My parents before me built that. My ancestors built that. And we take it as a prideful thing to make sure we're always respectful, we're kind, we're no pushover, but we're respectful. So you need to do that because you never know who's watching. And it's perfect. It's a perfect segue from life as it is into sport. And we had some, I remember we were on a recruiting trip to UNC, and we were talking to Coach Damon. And Coach Damon was telling us how he was at Surf Cup looking at a player, and he's walking to that player's game, and he notices on a field by the berm that there's this girl, and he stops, and she does something to catch his eye, and he starts watching her, and he realizes, like, this girl's really good. How do I not know who this girl is? Ends up signing that girl. She goes on to UNC. She goes to play for the U20s. She's now in the NWSL forward. I think her last name is Darlene. Really, really good player. But he found her on accident because he was there to see somebody else on a different field that he walked by. So I hear these stories often about that, and it's just like, to your point, it's make sure you're doing everything you can, playing the best you can, giving the best effort, because you never know who's watching. So from that point on, now that you have Diego putting all those things out, talk to me about how he kind of narrowed it down. Were there some things that you thought, realistically, having him categorize things that were more important to him, that were in line with where he wanted to play, where he wanted to be at, what his eventual goals were? Like, how did you really kind of break that down now that he's out there being seen and he's out there putting his name out there?
Yeah, I think, the good thing for Diego was, he's a good kid, right? And he had interest from D1 schools. He had interest from D2 schools. He had interest from D3 schools, right? And they all pretty much say the same thing. Who else are you talking to, right? So I just told Diego, hey, you need practice at talking to schools, right? So talk to D3 coaches, talk to D2 coaches. I know you want to go D1, but you have to have offers from D3s to get D2 offers. And you need offers from D2s to get D1 offers, right? Like you said, not everybody goes through that, but I just thought it helps, right? And back to the parents, at Serve, we had this great camaraderie with all the parents, and everybody has insight, and they're all professionals, and they all talk to other professionals, and so we all kind of help each other out, right? So that was kind of one thing that I told my son is, like, you want to make sure that you're talking to everybody, right? And then what happened with Diego was you start to notice that there's some schools that want him a little bit more than other schools, and there's some schools that you don't know if they want him or not. They called them, they reached out, they had a Zoom conversation with them, but you don't know. And that's the other thing that parents need to understand. You are out of the picture. These coaches, they are not talking to you.
Right.
They are talking to your son or your daughter. So you have to make sure that they're prepared and that they understand how to communicate, with the coaches. And I always told them, just be honest. Tell them who you're talking to. Tell them who's invited you on an official visit, because that's when you know somebody really interested in you, Jesse. And you just mentioned, when your daughter went on a trip, is when you get invited on an official trip, that's when you know this school is really interested in you, because they're paying for you and your family to fly out, to see the program, to see the school, to see the facilities. So there's an interest there. So, that was one of the things that I always talk to my son is, like, make sure you're talking to everybody and, you're letting them know that there is an interest on you going to their school because of their team, because of their program. And if there isn't, just let them know. Be honest, because guess what? My son was being recruited by two brothers. I was in a semifinal game in Richmond, Virginia, and it was 118 degrees, okay? And there was two guys that were sitting on the sideline, and they were both wearing swag from their schools. I just couldn't tell which school they were, and I didn't know who they were watching. But I'm like, why are these guys sitting in the sun? Well, it turns out one of them was the head coach of West Point, and the other one was the head coach of DePaul. And they were both there to see my son. I had no idea, right? So, I realized, like, wow, everybody knows each other. All these coaches talk to each other. So when they ask you, who else are you talking to, they're probably going to call that coach and be like, hey, are you also recruiting this kid? Because everybody's recruiting. Everybody's in this environment to find the player that, A, is great, and 2, the position that you're looking for, and 3, would be a great fit for your program. One thing happened with DePaul. That was one of the top schools that my son was considering. They came to watch him at playoffs last year for playoffs. And my wife went to a Sunday game. I think it was a game to make it to the finals in Richmond, Virginia. But she had to leave at halftime. I think you guys were at that game. I think you and Lisa came out to that game. So my wife was leaving at halftime, and Diego ran from the sideline to say bye to his mom. And the coach said, that's when I knew I wanted that kid on my team. Not only the soccer, because these coaches are going out and they're watching your warm-up, they're watching your interactions with your coaches, with your teammates, but they're also interacting with your parents and other parents. So that was impressive to know, because I told Diego, you see, not only are they watching you when you have the ball, they're also watching you when you don't have the ball, how you're interacting with your parents. Because that to the coach was like a big thing in character. Wow, he ran from the sideline to say bye to his mom.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And
Yeah.
that's true. It's like, it's a lot about character. When he was being recruited, how many calls did he take, roughly, would you say?
It's funny. I had an Excel spreadsheet, and there was over 40 calls. And there was some that I didn't even know he was talking to because, he's a teenager. He's playing, he's going to school, he's got senior activities. I didn't even know some of the schools that he was talking to. We were going to L.A. to play LAFC SoCal, which is a big rival for surf. And there was Boston College or Boston University was going to fly out to L.A. to see my son. And they told him, after the game, we're prepared to make you an offer. And I told my son, when did you talk to Boston? They're not on my list. He goes, Dad, I've had like 3 meetings with these guys already. So that's another thing. Remember, these coaches are not communicating with you.
Right.
They're texting your kid. They're hitting them up on Instagram, and they're having meetings set up with them. Sometimes your kids will tell you. Sometimes your kids won't tell you. So you don't even know. So that I know of, there was a lot of schools.
Funny thing is for us, I knew that that's how it worked, but I wasn't going to let that ride because my daughter's 16. At the time they're starting to call, she's 16 years old. And I told Jaden, I go, look, Jaden, every call you're on, we're going to listen in on. We sat there with her and listened. I said, I'm not going to say a word. They're not even going to know we're here. I go, but I'm going to listen. And the reason why is because I'm listening with 50-year-old ears.
Yeah.
And I've been in contract negotiations. I understand what people are saying. I understand the subcontext of what they're saying and what they're not saying. And it's my job as your parent to be able to tell you what I heard and to be able to help you with questions. Because, she's 16. She doesn't know. She has maybe a few questions to ask, and she doesn't know what to ask from there. So we would sit there, listen, and as she was going through her little thing, and she was, answering the questions they had for her, and none of it was really poignant because a lot of times they're just trying to get to know you initially. Like the first call is just like a get to know you type of deal. We would put mute, and I'd say, ask him about this, ask him about that, ask him about this. And then she would ask him. And after we did that, maybe a couple calls, because she didn't take a lot of calls. The thing about all of your children is they're all different. Like your son took 40 calls. Jaden did not have the desire to take more than 4 because she already knew. I told her, because the first day, when the first day happens on, June 15th or whatever it is, all the girls are looking at their phones and they're waiting to see who's going to email, who's going to call, all that kind of stuff, because that's when you can officially talk to the kids. Jaden's phone was blowing up. We knew it was going to blow up because she had great years and we knew that there was a lot of interest. And then we went through them all. We started listing them all. And then I go, and she listed them. She had her little notepad with all her stuff in it. And I go, okay, well, what are you going to do? She goes, well, look, Pops, I'm just going to, these 24, I'm going to send them this message. And then I said, let me see it. And basically it was a polite way of saying, thank you so much for your interest. Like, I'm excited that you guys would even consider me. It was very good. She wrote it herself, which was really, really nice. And then we helped her tweak it just a little bit. And she said, but right now I'm really only interested in a few schools, and I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Yeah. So if something changes, I'll let you know. And then she sent those out. And then she only had 4 schools that she actually took calls with, just 4, because she knew exactly where she wanted to go. And then when she got that, I was surprised because most kids want to take as many trips as they can take, right? She was like, she just took 2 trips. That was it. There was a third that she wanted to take, but that team, it felt like they weren't trying to really get it done. And so Jaden felt like, well, that's not that important. Like, I have this much time frame to get it done. I have all this other stuff going on. I'm trying to knock these out fast so I can make a decision. They're not, if it's not that important to get it done, then that's fine. We'll just do these 2 schools. And then she went to those schools, which is UNC and USC. She ended up choosing USC, which was totally her choice. Like, we went to both, gave her the pros and cons. I remember sitting in both rooms telling her what we thought about it, asking her what she thought about it, and then telling her, like, hey, whatever you decide to do, like, we're good with either decision. These are both excellent schools. The coaches are both awesome. The programs are great. The communities are nice. Like, one is across the country and one is in our backyard. Yeah. But that doesn't matter to us. Like, whatever you decide, we're gonna be supportive. So I can totally relate to that. But I just feel bad. Like, I didn't do enough, which is what most parents should probably do a lot more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody's different, right? Yeah. Everybody's recruiting is different. And I think with us is you don't know what their offer is. Because for us, it's like, what is the offer, right? Because in the boys' side, it's totally different. There's a pot of money, and it's got to be distributed between a lot of players. So some schools we're talking full rides, some schools we're talking, X amount of dollars. So for us, it was a little bit different because we knew that whoever was serious enough, whoever was going to come in with the best offer, was going to make them an offer to go on a visit. So for us, it was once you go on a visit at those schools that really want you and that are coming to the table with the most money, that's where he's going to make his decision. At the end of the day, it was going to be his decision.
Right.
Funny thing for us is we didn't know that USD was looking at him. I would see them at the games. They would even go to their practice, but they took a long time to recruit him because they wanted to make sure that that was the player that they really wanted. So they were actually the last school to come. And that was the only California school that really came to the table with anything serious. Oh, wow. And my son wanted to stay in California. But all the schools that really, really wanted him were outside of California. Yeah. So, again, he got to 3 visits. He got invited to more visits. But some, he was like Jaden, very polite. I don't see myself going to that state or that's too far or whatever. So we didn't go on those visits. But the 3 visits that he went to, those were the 3 that he considered as where he was going to make his, soccer career out of. So everybody's different. That's great that, you had a different experience because sometimes, my son's team had 20-some players on the roster. 18 of them are playing college right now. And some are playing D1, some are playing D2, some are playing D3. So you just don't know. Everybody had a different pathway to get there. But I will tell you that those that went to the schools they wanted to go, they had to work at it. It wasn't just, somebody just came and said, here you go. Right. They offered you, the best in the world. And, of course you're going to take it. There's a process. There's, the kids have to perform because they're continuing to watch you. Because remember, we talked about earlier, you're competing against the player portal and you're competing against international players. So these schools are going to make an investment in you. They want to know what they're getting, right? At the end of the day. So it's, it's a process that everybody, goes through in a different way. I will tell you that, because I work with kids that are in different clubs, some clubs take college recruiting serious and some don't. Some like Surf, had a dedicated coach that's helping the kids with their highlight films and communicating with schools and having these meetings where, let's write down, the schools that you want to go to, because guess what? A lot of those, schools, especially the good schools, they're not calling the kid only. Right. They're calling the director at your club. Right. They're calling your head coach. My son's head coach had conversations with all the schools that made him an offer. Tell us about how, your son, this player is in practice. Tell us about how the parents are, because they want to know somebody that they're recruiting into their program. Is this person going to help my program or are they going to hurt my program? Right. So, you have to be at the right place, talking to the right people. That's kind of what, got me into helping kids out.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to jump to. So it's easy to help out your son because you have a vested interest in doing that, right? Like you want to make sure that you give them the best opportunity to get the most out of life that they can get when it comes to anything, especially sports, because it's something that's a niche thing. It's not every kid gets to really do it. But I was curious when you started telling me that you were helping other kids and kind of the story about how it happened, because I think that the best things generally happen by accident, right? You never plan it. You know what I mean? You never plan what it is you're going to do. You just kind of put yourself in these areas and opportunities come. And the older you get, the quicker you see the opportunities. Am I correct to say that? Like when I started this podcast, I was 50 years old. But I saw the opportunity immediately and I was like, oh, I want to do that. That looks like fun. I could see the value in it. Like, let's get into it. And then you're able to just go because now I'm bringing 50 years of experience in all these different fields to create this product. And now I'm able to do it. And I enjoy it because I love having conversations and learning all this stuff. So now I'd like you to tell a story about how you kind of got into helping other kids and also talk about like what it is you do now. Like what is it you do now? Because there's going to be people out. I've had guests on the show before, and after they come on the show, like we get inundated with messages to try to reach out to those coaches because a lot of parents just don't know what's out there, and it's because there's a lot of stuff out there that you kind of have to go through the weeds to figure out what's actually good and what's valuable and what's not, and just kind of like in a front or a facade that looks good, but it doesn't really have any value, long-standing value. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got going after Diego, like after now it's no longer your child, it's somebody else, and kind of what it is you're doing now, what kind of like service that you offer and what it does.
Yeah, and I think, back to it happens by accident, right? So, I coached a lot of kids with my son, so I have a lot of kids that I know. Their little siblings and stuff that, kind of look up to me, and, they still call me coach. It's funny because, my son's one of his D1 colleagues or, teammates, one of the other kids on my son's team still calls me coach.
Once
and
you're a coach, you're always
yeah,
a
and
coach.
then the other guy's like, why are you calling him a coach? And he's like, oh, because he was my coach when I was a kid, So I saw that people would start calling me, asking me for questions. Hey, do you have time? My son's going through this or my daughter's going through that. Can you offer us some help? And I was getting those calls all the time. And some of the kids, the parents work a lot, especially if you live in California, right? It's not easy to make ends meet here. So parents sometimes have two jobs and, there are a lot of things that they have to worry about. And as much as they want to worry about, this kid that's playing soccer, they have other kids, right, that are doing dance or ballet. And that's, like you said, volleyball is expensive, dance is expensive. All these things are expensive.
Right.
So the parents are being pulled, a million directions. So I was getting calls from the kids sometimes. Sometimes I was getting calls from the parents. Hey, can you help my kid out? You've been through this with your son. What should we look for? And sometimes you have to be brutally honest. I don't know if your son or daughter has the ability to play collegiate soccer. Why don't you go and watch a game? And then you can see, does my kid have, the potential to play at that level? Because sometimes they don't think. They think, oh, it's easy. It's just the next stage after club, But no, it's different.
Right.
These are grown men, sometimes grown women. Can my kid compete in that level? So I saw that. Second thing that I saw is, families with time or with means, they find support. They find help. But there's a lot of families that don't have the means or don't have the time or they don't know, right? Because they didn't play soccer. Right. They play football or they play basketball or they just don't know. So that's kind of where I saw an opportunity, and then there's kids that you can see that they're driven, and I said, how can I help these kids? And that's kind of what I started, right? I started my little program that I created for kids where, I have to see that there's potential, Jesse, because at the end of the day, not every kid's going to play, in college. Right. Two, that they're committed, and three, that the parents are committed because this is a process, right? And I know some of my friends paid, large sums of money to other professionals to help their kids. And after talking to them, they say, I didn't really get what I thought I was going to pay for. And they really didn't do what they said they were going to do. So I just said, because the kind of person I am is like, I don't mind helping and giving guidance to kids. But if this is something that I'm going to do, I want to formalize it where I'm meeting with these kids on a weekly basis, kind of what I did with my son. Mm-hmm. And actually, my son did this with other professionals out there. And I saw that it worked, where I'm spending time every week with these kids. We're talking about, their goals, their highlight films, what schools are you emailing. So the same things that I did with my son, I'm doing now with these kids, right? And working on, your highlight film, because that's a big thing. When you send out a highlight film, one of the kids that I'm working with, great player, is getting D1 interest, and he sends me his highlight film to evaluate it, and it was 7 minutes long, No
one's watching that.
No one's watching it, 7 minutes. And I said, yeah, all the clips are amazing, but, understand that these coaches get thousands of highlight films. The beginning of your highlight film, and I learned this from my son, has to be the best. Yeah. Because if the coaches are watching a highlight film where you do something different or you look amazing, they're going to continue watching. But guess what? They're only going to watch a minute, maybe two. Yeah. Rarely are they going to watch 3 minutes. 7 minutes, forget it. Nobody's watching 7 minutes. Right. It's just not, they don't have time, right? Too many kids. So just seeing that I have that experience, I want to give back, right? And I want to share that knowledge with people because I get calls all the time. Now that they see where my son's at, they want me to help their kid get to D1. And some of them do have the potential. Some of them, I have honest conversations with them. And I'm like, are you okay playing D2? Because D1's not easy. Yeah, I'm interested in playing D2 or D3. Okay, then I can work with you because you have to be realistic as well. Like I told my son, talk to D3 schools because you don't know if D2 schools are going to call. So don't, and the other thing is, what are you going to college for? Are you going there for an education? Or are you going there for sports? Because sometimes D3s are better academic schools than D1s. Right. And they have a good soccer program. They just happen to play in a D3 program. And sometimes those D3 programs can beat D2 programs or D1 programs. So don't close yourself off to that. Right. And, so I see there's a big need, right? And if anything, I'm here to offer help and guidance And I just see that, unfortunately, some clubs don't offer that, or some parents don't look for that. So these kids are in limbo. And I have stories of kids that should be at a D1 college right now. They are that good, but they didn't have the support from a parent. They didn't have the support from their club. And unfortunately, somebody that's very talented that could have made soccer a career are not exercising it because they didn't have the guidance or the support from somebody like me or other people that are out there. So, yeah, so it's been fun. I've helped, like I said, some kids have gotten noticed. They've gotten invitations to do official visits. They've gotten invited to camps because the coaches want to see them up close because they've seen them in games. But, D3s and D2s, you can come in and play and train with the team. So some of the kids have had those opportunities. So, yeah, I mean, it's been fun. And, looking forward to working with other kids because I feel there's a need, especially where I live. There's a lot of clubs. I feel that there's a need there, and there's something that I can offer that's of value, and I think parents would appreciate it.
That's dope that you do that because, like you said, a lot of times people just don't know what to do, and you have this talented kid or that you think has the potential to play at any level of college, and they're never going to get seen because they just don't have a plan of action. And you get so many people that fall through the cracks. I always think, and you're a guy that understands like the world of soccer, right? Like I'm just learning about it, but I always thought to myself, like, I don't understand how we're the biggest nation, one of the biggest nations in the world, with the most money in the world, with arguably the most athletic kids in the world, yet we can't compete like consistently as one of the top 5 teams in the world. Like, I don't understand how that works. For me, it seems like now knowing more and kind of watching and delving in. I mean, just watched the U.S. play a couple of days ago, and it was unwatchable. It's
painful.
Yeah, it's painful because you want to cheer. Like, I want to cheer for them. I want my nation to do good. But I think it's a double-edged sword when it comes to the United States because, A, we are a capitalistic country. That's part of what makes us great, is that we are a capitalistic country. But sometimes that can get in the way of things like this because development and capitalism doesn't always work when it comes to sport because there are people that don't have the capital to invest in their kids who may have the talent, even more talent than these kids that do have the capital, and they fall through the cracks and we don't end up getting the best of the best. I mean, tell me, what do you think? This is kind of off topic, but I think it's kind of a good thing for people to understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, I watch soccer, right? I travel, Mexico, U.S., England, Italy, Spain, and it's just different, like to me, my son's been to Spain twice, right? We've taken teams to compete in Spain twice. And you go to a little town that probably has, 10,000 people population. You should see their soccer facilities. They're insane. They have turf fields. They have grass fields. They have a little shop where they sell stuff, food, they sell clothes, all to cover the expenses of those kids. And guess who gets to participate in those teams? The best of the best. It's not about the parents want to pay for my kid to play. So I think that's the difference, that I see, especially in Spain. Mexico is a different animal, right? Because Mexico, they've been playing for a long time. They do go out to rural areas and small towns to look for talents. And, the pro academies over there are going to invest in people that they see that have potential. Same thing in Argentina and other South American and Central American countries. The U.S., unfortunately, it's a pay-to-play country, and it's access. And, to compete in tournaments, there's expenses. And when you're at a club, they're not going to pay for the family's expenses to travel, right? Or the child's expenses for that matter. So that's the big disconnect, Like right now, the U.S., a lot of these players that are on the national team, they all play international. They're not taking a lot of kids from the MLS or that are U.S. based. But, as you, and because, I know you've traveled with your daughter, as you go to all these showcases and tournaments, you see the talent. You see what's out there. So it's kind of surprising to you, right, that you don't see these kids, on the national team. I know for my son, when he's traveled to Spain and Mexico, he's got to compete against some of these guys that are playing for professional academies. So I know we have kids here that can compete. One of the kids my son competed against was Pau Cubarsi, who was the central defender for Barcelona. And we were in Barcelona, and I saw this kid, and my son was like, "Dad, that's the best defender I've ever played against. And I was talking to this man, and he said, which one was your son? So I told him, my son's number 5. And he's like, wow, we were impressed with his ability to take players on. And he was so, aggressive, and he had all these moves. And it was just fun to watch because in Spain, it's very much possession. You pass the ball. So they were excited about seeing my kid that was driving the ball, taking players on. Well, one of the kids that he took on was Pau Cubarsi, and he beat him a couple times, And so, I was having a conversation with his dad, not knowing that was his son. Mm. And he said, Barcelona just came to this tournament, and they just signed my son. So my son is moving from Girona to Barcelona. But that's the thing, kids have to be able to go international and compete because all those kids in Spain, guess what? They hold the best tournaments in the world. Mm-hmm. They hold MIC and they hold Mundialito. So they have, kids coming from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, from the U.S., so they get to compete. The U.S. has those tournaments, but it's not accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. You have to be at a club or you have to have the means to be able to take your kid to showcase that. So, unfortunately, that's kind of the difference that I've seen, when we've traveled and we've competed. We've competed against teams from Asia that are just amazing, and these kids, are super good and they take it serious. Yeah, I talked to one of the Japanese teams that we played in Spain. They train 6 days a week. 6 days a week. Parents are out there, and they train for 4 hours a day.
Like pro. Yeah,
it's like nuts. But then you play against these kids, and they're like super fast, super technical, super gifted, and you wonder why, because those parents are committed to that. Committed to their kid to get to the next level. I don't know here if we really have that commitment, right? Because there's no community that's saying, I'm going to build this beautiful soccer complex so that all these kids can come and compete because maybe some of these kids can go pro. Right. Just the investment's not there because they're competing against all these other sports, But
and also, I think because we're so big.
Yeah, it's so big.
In the community, you're talking about a place with 10,000 people. That's what? Chula Vista is like probably 100, like 10 times that.
Yeah.
It's probably like 100,000, 200,000 people in that small area. That's our small community. It's a couple 100,000 as opposed to 10,000. But I just always wondered that. It always baffled me. And it's like you watch the games with so much hope. And then as soon as you start watching the game, you're like, this is terrible. Like, we should be way better than this. It always bothered me. But I figured I would ask you because I know you watch. You're one of those guys that'll get up early in the morning to watch a game that's being played in Europe. So I'm not that guy. Like, I'll watch it if it pops on.
Yeah, and I think in other countries, soccer is a religion, right? Yeah. Since, you go to Brazil and, there's 1 million kids that are playing on the street, And the thing is that a lot of our kids have a lot of distractions here. They're not, some of them aren't. My son is with the ball all day long. He's dribbling through the house. He's juggling through the house all day long. That's his street, because he can't go outside and play with 5 other kids because the kids in our neighborhood aren't playing soccer. Right. He's got to drive 45 minutes to Del Mar where he finds other kids that are similar to him. That's the difference, Jesse. I think, the geography sometimes affects you because there's not, kids that you can just go outside and play. And, growing up, the reason I played baseball and basketball and football and soccer was because I learned to play on the street with my neighbors because we were always outside till it got dark.
Exactly.
Playing.
We didn't have phones.
We didn't have phones.
Stuff. We were just playing.
No, your parents would be like, go outside and play. We'll call you when dinner's ready or when it gets dark or when the lamps come on. Then you come inside the house. This generation is different. Yeah. It's not the same. So I don't know. I mean, I think the U.S. has improved a lot, especially MLS has been, improving so much. It's competing with La Liga MX now, if not better. It's getting, really good quality players now. So they're making improvements. How long is it going to take for us to really be, a competitor in the world? We don't know. And it's hard. It's hard to stay there. Like you look at Italy. Italy was a competitor forever, and they've been struggling for the last 10 years. But they won World Cup. So I think, I think they'll figure it out. I think, getting the right people at the right positions to make decisions, it's a big thing. But, at the end of the day, it's a business. Somebody's there generating revenue. And, people need results, right? And it's like, can you wait for this kid, to develop into the player that he is, or do you need to get results now? Like Christian Pulisic, who's, hands down probably the best player in the U.S. right now. He got passed over by all these pro teams in the U.S. because of his size. He had to go to Europe, So that's the other thing. Some kids get overlooked because they haven't fully
fit the model.
They don't fit the model. They haven't gone through puberty, or they're not big, they're not fast, they're not strong. They could be technically gifted, and soccer IQ is incredible, but these guys have to give results to who's paying the bills, right? So why am I going to give this kid a chance where it might take years for that kid to develop when I can bring this kid that's fast, strong, and is going to get me results today? So it's a hard question that people haven't figured it out yet, because obviously we haven't had the success yet, but I have a feeling it will happen. It just takes time. Just like San Diego, we didn't have an MLS team forever. If not, I would have hoped my son would have been part of the MLS Academy for this team. But now they just started this year. Now I just saw one of my friend's sons on the Right to Dream Academy team. So I'm excited for this generation. It's just too bad that, the generation that's here didn't get those opportunities, right? And it's just
all about timing.
It's all about timing. It's about luck as well. Yeah. And it doesn't come easy, right? Like you said, 1% of kids are in your daughter's situation. Yeah. What about the other 99?
And that's what the show is for, to try to help the other 99%. So on that note, as we kind of close up, what is if you could give 1 to 2 tips to parents that are out there trying to get the most exposure for their kid to help them get to the next level, or even just wrap their mind around moving on from the club environment to scholarship. And we're talking about soccer, but this is relevant to all sports, I believe. I believe any sport you're dealing with is going to have some level or similar method that what you're talking about in terms of getting exposure. What are some of those tips you would give them, just to say, you have one parent in front of you and they're asking you hey, what can I do? What's the 1 or 2 things I could do to give my kid the best opportunity to be seen?
So make sure that they're in the right place and they're being coached by the right person, because if not, then it's an uphill battle, right? So they have to be in the right environment with the right teamwork, the right level of competition, so that they improve. Because it's all a development, right? They don't never stop developing. But you have to be seen, and you have to be ready for when you're seen, right? And you have to support them and help them and guide them to what's the possibility, but how do I get there? How do I get exposure? How do I get seen? Because it's not easy. It's not easy. You can't just show up at a showcase and think, oh, these scouts are going to see me, because sometimes they're there for 5 minutes, right? So you have to have, some sort of communication with some of these coaches beforehand to let them know that you have an interest in going there. And sometimes, you have to get feedback. Sometimes the feedback might not be good, but you have to be able to take it, right? And the third thing is, the most important thing is it can't be your dream. It's got to be their dream, because they're the ones that are going to be putting in the work. I would trip out, to see my son when he's on off season. He's at the park running, sprinting, going through cones on his own, Jesse. Yeah. If I would have told him he had to do that during his vacation break, he probably would look at me crazy, like, what are you talking about? But because we knew what his end game was and that it was going to take a lot of work and effort on his part, it has to be their drive that gets them there. Because as much as I want them to get there, and it's great, right? Like my kid's there, your kid's there, but it's not easy. And now you're faced with other adversity about playing time, about competition on your team. So, it's not an easy thing, and it's not for everybody. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is don't live through your kids. Yeah. It has to be their dream, and support them, but make sure you get the right people to help you, the right people to develop you, or to work on the speed, the strength, the intelligence of whatever sport it is, because there's people out there that, are there for business, right? They're there to make a buck, but do they really have your kid's best interest at hand? You have to find those people. Like you said, you found somebody early on for Jaden, and that person was passionate, and I know who you're talking about. He's passionate, he's driven, he knows what he's talking about. So that's a great person to find, and they're out there. In every community, they're out there, but parents need to talk to other parents. And that's the thing, you're always learning, right? You have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and talk to other parents, talk to coaches, have a conversation. Like, does your coach know that your son wants to play collegiate soccer? Like, did you ever have that conversation? Because what's going to happen when the D1 or D2 school contacts your coach? Coach is like, oh, really? Jesse wants to play in college? He never told me. Right. So it takes a village. At the end of the day, it does take a village. It takes your coaches, your club, your trainers, other parents, your siblings to support you in your dream. But at the end of the day, it's the kid. You know, the kids have to put in the work. They have to be driven. They have to understand that it's a process, and they have to be committed to the process, and they have to be diligent in the process. If not, it just doesn't work.
Right. That's such good stuff. It's funny. And like you said about Diego being out there doing his own thing, I think it all, again, boils down to being clear. Because once you understand what it is that you want, you can figure out the path that it's going to take. You can figure out what you have to commit to as an athlete and know what the parent's committed to as a parent. And then you guys commit to the process. And to your point, like right now, my youngest is spending a whole year training before he gets to high school. He's got 4 years to do what he's trying to do in high school. And when we sat down and broke down like the things that he needs to do, like his workouts, his eating, and all that kind of stuff, he's totally committed to that process on his own. And the best example I had was, I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 days ago. My oldest was going to take my daughter bowling with his girlfriend. And my youngest son was there, and he's like, hey, we're going to go bowling. Do you want to go? And he's like, oh, I want to go, but I have to go run. Like, I have to go get my sprints in. Like, it's Sunday, I have to get my run in. So he's like, I can't go. So then he went and he did his run. And then when he came back, his brother waited for him, and then they took him. But I didn't hear it. And my wife told me, did you hear what he said? I was like, no, I didn't hear what he said. He goes, he told him he had to go run. I go, yeah, that kid's dialed in right now. Like, he's dialed in with what he wants to do. So the fact that they understand what it is and that they're dialed in, I think that's the key, is like the kid, it has to be the kid's journey. And I've heard this, you're not the first guest that has talked about this. I talk about it all the time, but it's nice to hear the people who are actually having success with their kids. They all kind of have a similar way of thinking and some characteristics that they instill in their kids that are kind of at the common core of what it needs to be done in order for them to be successful. So it's good to hear. But dude, I had a great conversation. I learned a ton. I appreciate you for coming out, dude.
No, thanks for inviting me.
It's always good to hang out with a friend and have a conversation, but it's even better when you have something that you can share that a lot of people can get value from.
No, and I thank you for doing this, because like I said, I would have loved to have seen something like this, right?
Yeah.
I always talk about resources, and it takes a village. It takes experts. It takes people that have gone through it, because I had those experts. I had other parents that did this before me. You know, I would talk to other parents of kids that are already playing D1. You know, what was your process?
Right.
What happened with your kid? Because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
But if you don't ask, if you don't take the time to make that phone call, how are you going to get information? You're just not, unless somebody's sharing it or you find it by accident.
Yeah.
But you have to take the initiative to reach out, find those people that are sharing that information, reach out to people that have gone through it. Because I think that's the biggest thing, right? Now that you've gone through this with your daughter, I bet you if somebody calls you and says, hey, what was your daughter's experience and how was the recruiting process, you can tell them everything that you experienced, right? Going on visits, talking about the pros and the cons. Like, some parents don't even know what that is because they've never experienced it. Right. But when you talk to somebody that has, it's a wealth of information. It's a wealth of knowledge, and it makes things easier, right? It removes roadblocks from the process.
Right, and we've had those conversations, and honestly, that was the impetus to get this whole thing started, was that I had always gotten lots of different questions about all these different topics, whether it's how do I get the most out of my kid, how do I make it so fun? Hey, you always have a team, your kids are always having a good time, but they're good. Like, how do you do that? Like, your daughter's doing this, your son's doing that. They're so athletic, like all these different things. And I thought to myself, like, well, this is just the way that I think. But it's not, I didn't create it myself. Like, I'm a product of my coaches and my experiences over 50 years, right? And probably 45 years in sport, because I started when I was 5 years old. All of those lessons are what people would ask, and that's the reason why this actually became a thing. And that's why I love talking about it, because it's so easy to do, because I know it and understand it.
Yeah, no, you said when we start, it's going to feel like you're just having a conversation, and the hour's going to go by fast.
We're already done.
Yeah, it went by fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again,
Awesome.
brother, I appreciate
Jesse,
it, man.
Thank you.